Thank you very much, Pradhan. We're going back to Russia, and as indicated, I have been working on helping to put some of those ideas that were in the previous presentation in practice for the Russian financial education programs. So what I'm going to present is a proposal about how one might go about the impact evaluation of these programs. So, let's see, I still have to practice. I'll start off with a quick introduction of the programs, and I think to many of you these are already known quite well, and they have been discussed in the previous session. So I'll go through those quickly, but maybe also still do it to highlight the complexity of the program. It's not one simple evaluation. This financial education program tries to target many objectives, many target groups in many regions. It's not a simple small trial to evaluate. It's a path towards a national program. I think I'll skip this. So the importance of financial literacy has been noted in the previous sessions. And this program consists of the financial education and consumer protection. And I've been working only on the evaluation of the financial education programs, right? So it's a limited focus that I have had. But indeed, it will be interesting to later on see the interactions between, does financial education work out differently in places where there are different levels of development of the financial sector and consumer protection. The program is set up in a way that it's first pilots in 2 regions, and then there's a national scale-up. And both are interesting to evaluate, but have each their own challenges. So to come back to the project intervention, tries to reach many different target groups. The main target groups are indeed our youth, going all the way from primary education. There are even some small pilots on pre-primary, secondary, university students. Also, there are several programs that target adults in the workplace and poor, disadvantaged adults in general. And in some regions, there are some smaller pilot that target, for instance, summer camps and pensioners and small business people and so on. So it tries to reach very many different people and also develops for each of those groups curricula that can be delivered, content that can be delivered to provide financial education. And then there's the scale-up, right? So the first is the 2 pilot regions in which the materials are developed, the delivery is practiced, and then there is the intention to roll it out at a national level through these regional financial literacy centers, and do that mostly through supporting teacher training. So it's not piloting the instruments themselves, but disseminating the material that has been developed now and in the pilot regions tested out on a wider scale. So these are the regional ones. So the pilot is taking place in, well, as you probably know, in Volgograd and Kaliningrad. So why do an impact evaluation? So in the previous presentation, there was a distinction made between outputs and outcomes. So how does that apply in a program like this? It will be different for the pilot and the scale-up. So let me first talk about the pilot. In the pilot, there will be instruments developed, teachers will be trained, and the program will work with teachers to try out these, relaying those materials to students. So that's under control of the project. But what's not under control of the project and what's really the objective of the program is whether the students increase their financial knowledge. Do they learn something in those courses? And next, do they do something with that knowledge? Do they change their attitudes towards financial behavior? Do they start to engage more in financial planning? Do they set goals, financial goals? And even, do they change their financial behavior? For instance, increase savings. And then, of course, the question is not only whether that's the case or whether that happens, but most of all, why did some things work or not work? And that's especially important for the pilot regions, because the pilots are exactly there to learn how to improve. So the impact evaluation can help to improve the program for the scale-up. Now, in the scale-up, why do it again if we already evaluated in the pilot regions? Well, I think there are two reasons to also propose an impact evaluation for the scale-up. The first is that we'll probably get better results because we've learned something in the pilot regions, or you have learned something. There will be better materials developed. The mistakes that were made in the pilot regions have been corrected in the scale-up. So that would, for that reason, we would expect better results. But very often things can also go wrong during the scale-up, because during the pilot regions things were quite under control of the project. There was a lot of attention of different groups during the implementation phase and making sure that all the materials were delivered to the students. In the scale-up, that's not the case. There's much less control. There will only be training of teachers, and it will be left pretty much up to the teachers to deliver that material to students. So with less control and sort of a broader program, sometimes it doesn't go as good as it goes with a smaller program which is tightly monitored. So definitely that part of whether the same learning results are reached also in the scale-up are important. And that's, of course, what in the end matters for national policy, because the objective is to increase financial literacy for the entire population. And I've put here a second big bullet, which I often in my work find maybe has the most impact of the work. I think it's doing an evaluation and working together with people who are implementing the project and the policymakers. Designing an evaluation is very helpful to think about what this project actually tries to achieve. Because people who are working, project implementers, are very much focused on sort of their tasks of delivering, the learning materials, the training, and if that has been done, there's a risk of saying, well, we've done what we were supposed to do. An impact evaluation helps to realize that it's one step further that really matters, and that's the financial literacy of the ones who finally participate in the training. And with thinking about evaluation, you're always reminded of that, because that's what the impact evaluation focuses on. So the proposal I've made is a mix between academic sort of rigor and the strength of evidence and making it feasible in terms cost-wise, right? Because this is a very big program, many target groups nationally. You could design an extremely sophisticated evaluation, which is then impossible to implement. So I've tried to make here a trade-off between what I would do if I was in charge of the budget and would say this is important and this is less important. So these are the main elements of the proposal, and I'll go through them in more detail in the rest of the presentation. So one is to use a unified framework for measuring financial literacy. That's also part of the financial education programs. Even though there are many different target groups and programs that will be developed under this project, one can, and they've also developed sort of competencies which depend on how old you are and what you're doing, which are universal. Then we don't want to evaluate all initiatives. We intend to focus only on the the main ones, the ones that focus youth in the regular school system, and a few innovative ones, but not evaluate everything that under the sun, because it may get just too big. The other big part of the proposal is to do quite a sophisticated evaluation in the pilot regions. Use one of those, the method of randomized assignments, or with control and treatment groups, just like was discussed in the previous presentation. And also do a mix between pre- and post-tests of students who participate in the program and students who do not participate in the program, and interviews done at the households, so that are outside of the education system. Then for the rollout of the program, which is much bigger, the proposal is to focus only on whether students learn the gain in financial knowledge. So rely mostly on pre- and post-tests, similar as were done in the pilot regions, and used more statistical analysis to predict what the probable implications are in terms of goal setting attitudes from the patterns that we observed in the pilot regions. The reason is that it's probably impossible to do a randomized evaluation. When it's nationally scaled up, then that's almost by definition it's nationally scaled up, so it's everywhere. So you have to think of different methods to do evaluation and focus on the particular question of whether the same type of results are reached as in the pilot regions. And then there's a whole component which seeks qualitative feedback from both students and teachers on how the program was delivered. This was the button. So for measuring financial literacy, we've developed this framework of competencies which goes through, which has many dimensions. First, the domains, which go from earning to expenditures, financial planning and budgeting, personal savings, loans, investments, insurance, risks and financial security, consumer protection, and general knowledge and basic of economics and financial arithmetic. Then we have in each of those domains 3 different components which focus on the knowledge part, on the attitudes and goal setting, and on the financial behavior. Did I skip too quick? No. Then, of course, what exactly the competency that has to be reached will depend on the age group. So we've distinguished between 3 age groups corresponding to primary, secondary, and adults. So you can imagine it becomes a very big matrix of competencies, and we've tried to develop questions that relate to those competencies. And these are included in the entry and exit tests, and later on also in the household survey. The household survey and entry and exit tests are kind of different. So we think of the tests mostly to measure knowledge, and the household surveys can go one step further and also look at attitudes and financial behavior, because that's a very hard thing to measure in a test. As you know, a lot of the material has already been developed. So the OECD has developed toolkits. There has been a financial literacy survey here in Russia. So as much as possible, we drew from existing instruments which has been tested before, preferably, of course, here in Russia. And so these are some examples of the tools. This is the domain of risks and financial security. The target group is adults. The competency that was defined is to know about the possibility of financial fraud and what to do becoming a victim of this fraud. And the question is, and what are the features of a financial pyramid? And here is it's another one for the 7 to 11-year-olds in the area of the earning expenditures. Recognized in the competency defined is the recognition of being prudent with money at early age, and match the needs with financial opportunities. And a question that we sort of defined to link to that is whether they disagree or agree with the statement of, I don't have to save because my parents will take care of me. So these are just 2 examples, and of course there are many more. Then I already told you about the focus of 8 initiatives. And let's go through the randomized evaluation then for the pilot regions. So how would that work in practice? I think of it as, first we have to identify the institutions where the training would take place. So these might be primary schools, or when it's adults at the workplace, it would be firms that are interested in participating in this program. You find the group interested to participate, or potential participants, and then you conduct this lottery or do a randomized assignment of who will be in the program and who will not be in the program. So it could be at the school level or at the workplace level if there are many potential participants. If there are less potential participants, if we only have 2 universities where this program takes place, you have to do this randomization at a lower level, for instance, at teacher level or even at the student level. It's a trade-off in costs. There's of course a risk if you do it at a lower level that people within the firm or within the university start talking to each other, and the control group also learns, which would make it hard, which would make the evaluation less credible. So what type of analysis would we do that with? What type of data? So for the pilot, we would have first and entry tests, both in the places that were in the program and the ones that were out of the program as a result of this lottery or randomized assignment. So the first thing to test is whether indeed that randomized assignment worked. And one way to test that is to see whether the entry tests of the students in both these places is roughly similar. So if we see no difference, we'll be very happy and say, well, this statistics worked, and indeed lottery causes that the 2 groups are very similar. Then once we have an exit test, and we need to do those at the same time, remember students also learn through their regular math classes, we can see whether the students who joined the financial literacy training in addition to their regular education increase their financial literacy knowledge more than in the control group. So this is exactly what we saw on the previous graph of looking at that difference between the 2 lines. So what's the purpose of a household survey? To be done soon afterwards on a sample of those in the treatment and control group. Well, first of all, it provides a check on the financial knowledge that was measured in the exit test. There's a little bit more risk of cheating in the exit test because also teachers have may prepare their students for the test or even help them. In a household survey, it will be done by a really external party. So it's a double check on whether the knowledge was really there. It also allows a bit more time because the test is short. An interview can last longer. So we can ask about financial goal setting and attitudes. And another household survey, which I'm proposing to be done 1 year later, can look at those things that take longer to materialize, such as financial behavior. For instance, people will not change their savings behavior overnight. It may take time. So that's these lasting effects can then be measured in the second household survey. The first household survey will be most important for learning from the pilot because by the time the second household survey happens, probably the scale-up is already in place. For the scale-up, what I'm proposing is to do before and after tests. With statistical analysis to see what that implies in terms of impact. So it's as simple as this, but I think still a challenge to implement since the training of the students is not part of the project, so that will have to be closely traced by the group who's doing the impact evaluation. It would simply be doing the same type of entry and exit tests for the students. Can we still do an impact evaluation? My proposal is to find to draw from the control group that we have from the pilot regions, find a group students that are very similar to the ones who were trained in the scale up, and then look at their test scores at the entry and exits. So this is a difference in difference type method, as it was mentioned previously, with some statistical matching, and we can then still see whether the difference between these entry and exit tests are a difference. Whoops. And then, as I mentioned, there is also a more qualitative component to the proposed evaluations. Interviews with participating teachers and students, which of course will only be done, in the treatment school, so there's no control group here. And we've prepared topic guides for those interviews, covering things like, do you find the learning material useful? Were students interested? Is it difficult to attract people? Similar types of questions to the students. It's a mix of closed questions or just very open questions asking for suggestions, things that will be in addition to, of course, what the implementers are already planning to do, and we'll just provide more information about how to improve the program. So this slide summarizes what is the proposal for the impact evaluation. It's a comprehensive design in the pilot regions. The reason is because that's the time when we probably can have most impact with the impact evaluation, because the scale-up hasn't happened yet, so the results can feed into the scale-up. It's also cost-wise more manageable because it's in 2 regions, so we don't have to travel too far to collect data. In the scale-up, what I'm proposing is to do only pre- and post-tests, because I think there the challenge is mostly into making sure that the delivery of the learning materials is actually taking place. Thank you.